It's another week of home brewing on Chicky Chicky Brew Brew, and we're going to talk about kegging this week. So first step, let's get right into it. Sanitizing. Everything must be meticulously clean and sanitized. That's how we stay out of trouble when it comes to kegging our beer. The beer's been in this beautiful Blickman fermenter for the last couple of weeks, and it's ready. We'll start out by filling the keg up with 5 gallons of sanitizing solution. Minimizes the headspace in there when we put it into the kegging system and use some CO2 to force the sanitizing solution through the rest of the drink lines. Saves gas when you do it that way, so fill it up. After sanitizing the lid, make sure that the relief valve's shut. Into the refrigerator it goes so we can hook it up. We'll make our connections in there on the CO2 side and the drink side. While I'm working on that, I want to tell you that Blickman fermenter that we've been using for a few months now is one of the greatest additions to our brewery. It really makes things a lot nicer. Going from primary to secondary, all you have to do is drain the trub out the bottom, and it keeps your beer from coming into contact with the outside world for the entire fermentation process. In fact, when we keg it today, that's the first time that beer is going to see the outside world since it went into the fermenter on brew day. Dirty drink lines there, we're going to check them in the beginning. And then we'll swap over and look at them again after we're done to make sure we get them nice and clean. 8 to 10 psi on the keg while we're just using the gas to push the sanitizing solution through the entire system like that. Those drink lines don't last forever either, and I configured mine so that I can remove them with a couple of nuts that are on the ends. So 6 months or so, and then you won't be able to get them clean anymore. Then you just replace them, do drink lines. Flush the lines out until you have nice clear. Sanitizing solution coming out. Take a look at the drink lines. Look at that, nice and clean. That's what you want. Got some cream ale in that other keg, delicious. Go ahead and secure the gas while we make our disconnections. Relieve the pressure inside the keg. Pull the drink lines. And the gas line. Whole thing comes back out of the fridge. Refrigerator gets a workout during this because of that warm beer that's going in there. It's going to drop the temperature or raise the temperature inside the refrigerator for a day or so. Don't panic, that's just the way it works. Now I'm going to use my Herculean strength to put the sanitizing solution back into the bucket. One of the few times I move a lot of liquid without using the pump. Maybe I'll work on a way to do that in the future. Lid back on there. That keg is ready for some beer now. It's nice and sanitary. Here's the hose we're going to use to transfer the beer from the fermenter into the keg. Goes in. Coil it in there and make sure that the inside of the hose fills up with sanitizing solution. That's the part that really needs it. It's easy to get bubbles in there, then they're not getting sanitized. Also, I keep a spray bottle of Star San out and make sure that that exterior connection gets a good spray. Stays wet for at least 2 minutes before we use it so that everything is nice and clean. No germs are going to get into our beer on its trip between the fermenter and the keg. And then finally the hydrometer and graduated cylinder go into the sanitizing solution as well. We're going to pull a sample and check the gravity while we're kegging, and I don't want to waste that beer, so it'll go back into the fermenter because the second keg in that fermenter is going to sit in there for a couple more weeks. We're going to get its gravity down lower and the alcohol content up higher. First step is we'll make sure there's no excessive amount of trub in the bottom of the fermenter, and as you can see there's not. Get good flow right away, and that's a great thing. So we won't be kegging any of the trub or anything like that, and that keeps the beer from having a lot of dead yeast in it and gives you just beer in the outlet. Since I've had the Blickman, I have not had to filter, and that saves a lot of work. You can see we have filters. We use them when we use other fermenters. Go ahead and pull the sampling equipment out and set it aside, ready for use. Good to go. And grab that hose. No matter what I do, I always grab the hose in the middle. There, we'll drain it out and waste no time. We'll quickly connect it. Got a quick disconnect that I put on the fermenter, and the other end just goes straight into the keg. Open up the valve and we'll get our porter flowing in there nicely. Looks good. And it feels pretty quick. Don't forget, if you're using a closed fermenter like everybody does and you're draining out of the bottom or something like that, open up a path for air to enter on the top. On this Blickman fermenter, if you don't remove the either the airlock or the overpressure valve, then it'll draw a vacuum on the inside of the fermenter and stop the flow. You'll wonder why nothing's coming out, and then you'll pull it off and you'll hear all the air rushing in. I do that all the time. Not a major problem, but just a reminder in case you're in that same situation. Just keep an eye on the flow, and keg's about half full, so we're going to go ahead and pull our gravity sample. Just make sure we pull enough so that we can float the hydrometer. And don't forget, it takes more to float it at the end of the cycle than it does at the beginning, because it's going to float down lower, right? Starting gravity on this batch was about 1060. We'll see what the final turns out to be, and then we'll talk for a quick minute or two about calculating alcohol content as well. Go ahead and let that finish filling. I try to watch it like a hawk during this portion just to make sure nothing gets anywhere near that open top of the keg. And I think in the future maybe I'll come up with a process to run the liquid into the keg through the ball lock connector and allow me to keep it even more sequestered away from the atmosphere while I'm filling as well. Always something to change in the future, right? Okay, we're going to call that keg full, off with the valve. If you disconnect the hose at the top like that, let all the liquid in it drain down into the keg, then you don't end up with the beer stuck in the hose and you're not knowing what to do with it. And when I end up in that situation, it always ends up on my floor, so this will help you have that not happen to you. I'll try to get the lid on it as quickly as possible. Once the lid on it is on it, then it is sealed up and ready to go into the refrigerator, and that's where we're going next. So same process as with sanitizing, into its spot in the fridge. Hook up the air, the CO2 line. If I could push on it straight, it would go right on. Pull the drink line out. That line's full of sanitizing solution. That solution's not going anywhere though, so just don't forget about it when you go to drink the beer. You're going to get a shot of sanitizing solution in the beginning. Don't want to fill it up with sanitizing solution now. That way, that if you do, that beer in the line won't get carbonated. Make sure the lid's on tight. Double check all the routing of the hoses. I've done them backwards more than once. Now let's push some pressure on there. Quick note, have your tools before you start. In this case, I want to pressurize that keg to about 30 psi. With my fingers, I can only turn the screw enough to get about 20 psi, so now I have to run off and get my screwdriver. When I come back with it, eventually, here we go, up to about 30 psi. The relief on that keg is going to lift at about 40 to 45 psi, so be careful. Higher pressure doesn't mean it's going to carbonate any faster. Once you have the pressure on the keg, though, go in there and let the air out of the top of the keg so that your beer is absorbing CO2 and not air. Final gravity about 1016. That turns into about a 5.5% batch, which is not too bad. I'm going to go for a little bit higher gravity on the second batch. I think that's going to cover it for us for this week. I hope you enjoyed kegging, and we'll talk to you soon.